Chris Langan is the smartest man in the world.
I know people are going to be asking, why is the smartest man in the world living on a farm in the middle of Missouri?
With Einstein's IQ being a 160, Chris's is between 195 and 210. He was interviewed by Michael Knowles and was asked about his beliefs in the existence of God.
If we're talking about a theory of everything, the first question we have to establish, does God exist?
Yes.
Simple as
Yes.
that.
Well, it's the identity has the reality has an identity. Okay? The identity is that as which something exists. Okay? Matter of fact, when you say the word reality, you're naming an identity. You're identifying something.
I'm smiling because your answer on this is so beautiful. It just reminds me of Moses at the burning bush. And Moses at the burning bush says, "Who shall I tell the people that you are?" Talking to God. And God says, "Tell them I am that I am."
That's right.
I am identity itself. I'm being himself.
That's exactly right. And that's what the CTMU says. It just comes up with the mathematical structure that you need to build a reality out of that. You see? So you come up with that identity and then you search it for its properties. You see, once you've built the preliminary framework, then you start deducing the properties of this identity, and you find out that those properties match those of God as described in most of the world's major religions. Okay, but what are its properties? Okay, are its properties such that you can deny the existence of God, or are its properties such that God definitely has to exist? And the answer is God exists.
God definitely
the properties of the central substance and central principle of reality, those properties are attributed to God, including, of course, things like you have the three O's: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, but then you've also got consciousness. God has to be sentient.
So you're saying, no, this God is, God himself is conscious and therefore personal?
Yes, you can establish a personal relationship with God. We're images of God. You know what an image is? It's basically the product of a mapping. God maps himself into each human being, right? That's a very personal thing that God is doing for us, right? And I don't understand how anybody can say that it's any different. We reflect the structure of the universe. Each one of us, we're carried by it. Everything we do, we exist in a medium. What is that medium? Right? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
What holds it together? What is the unifying coherence, the source of coherence of that medium?
So for the medium that we exist in, there's like this internal structure that is natural, almost like when you take a drop of water and you look at it at a microscope, like a snowflake under a microscope, you can see this sort of crystalline structure. There is a logic to it, almost like a logic to a computer program, where everything in the entire universe has its own, a way that things work, a way that's made intentionally. In this medium, we have like 6 billion people on the planet, 8 billion people on the planet. How is it that we all can exist without brutally murdering each other and chopping each other's heads off and destroying each other and eating each other alive? It's because there is a internal structure and a logic towards the universe that we live in, a equilibrium. In that respect, there has to be some sort of force that holds everything together, to keep everything at peace, to make sure that things just don't destroy themselves. Thus, God does exist. What Chris mentions is that he's claiming that God is a separate entity, and we exist in the medium of that of which is created by God, and possibly even is God. I think it'd be really interesting to showcase why he thinks this way about God.
Is your claim a pantheistic claim that God is the universe, or the universe is God, and that's that?
God, it's more panentheistic. Do you know what panentheism is? The idea is that you've got the physical universe that you see around you, but God is not confined to the physical universe.
Okay.
See, there's an ordinary pantheist assumes that God is somehow confined to the universe, that there is just what we see around us, and God is in every piece of it. God is distributed over it.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a little bit more complex than that, because this part of the universe that we see around us cannot exist just by itself.
Yeah.
Okay? There are certain things that it entails. And when you go into those entailments, that's how you get to God. That's how you get to the identity of reality. Okay? And now to get back to the reality of self-simulation, or at least that's what I call it, self-simulation. But to get back to the simulation hypothesis, that we're living in the display of that simulation. In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect. Okay? And God captures both of those things. He captures both the display and the processor.
What do you mean? I hate to put it in.
Well, I mean, okay, here's the display. You realize the display contains states.
Yep.
Okay, you see things, the objects contain states. States are static.
Yep.
That's why they're called states.
Yeah.
Okay, static. How do they change? Well, they have to be processed. Something has to
Okay.
process.
Yeah.
And in the calculus, for example, those are tiny little infinitesimal intervals. Okay, but they are not actually contained in the states themselves. They have a neighborhood, a little tangent space or what have you, where you can sort of draw little vectors that suggest that some kind of processing is going on. But the idea of being a state and being a process, those are two different things.
Yep.
In the ordinary way of looking at it, okay? It turns out that you can't properly describe reality and causation at all unless you put those things together somehow. And that's what it takes God to do, okay? God provides the processing functionality for your state. You have an internal state, an external state. You're a material human being, right? Like to explain how that is changing through time, and maintaining its coherence through time, even as it changes, that's what you need God for.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that entirely. And so I might not be sophisticated enough to parse all of the quibbles that there might be, but broadly speaking, as a Christian, so much of what you're saying resonates as obviously true for me. The idea that, well, I'm a member of the body of Christ. The idea that God creates the world in this great act of love, this great act of charity.
Self-love.
Well,
self-love. Don't forget, you're an image of God.
Right.
So in loving Himself, God loves you.
And
you're supposed to love God back.
Right. And this ties into something like the Trinity, right? The idea that God is three persons in one divine unity. So all of this is making a lot of sense to me. So now, how do I make sense of consciousness?
Yeah. Well, you decide what the ultimate irreducible objects are. Those are the quanta in terms of which you reason. It turns out that in order to quantize that theory that I was talking about, that theory of identity, where you've got the display and you've got the processor, and it's handling both. It turns out that in order to handle both of those things, you need a certain kind of quantum. That quantum is called an identity operator. God is the identity. So obviously these little quanta, they have to be, they're doing things, they're processing, so we can call them operators, right? They are identity operators, okay? The identity operator has, basically it takes input from the outside world, recognizes it or accepts it using syntax, processes it, and then returns it to the world as external state. Okay, so things come in, then they're processed, right? There's throughput, which is, you could call that the subjective or internal state of the identity operator, and then it's returned to the external universe.
But are you attributing now?
So what I'm saying is that's consciousness. And I'm saying that consciousness exists in every part of the universe because those are the quanta.
So we exist in this reality that is sort of a container. And our identity exists within this identity. So if we think of the universe as like a human body, okay? The universe is a body, right? Everything. We exist each almost like a singular cell within this body. And in order to peacefully coexist and be able to function in equilibrium, we need to act in accordance to what is considered to be God. But if we reject and deny the structure of the body, the place that we're within, if we are the antithesis of reality itself, the antithesis, the opposite of the place of which we exist, we get rejected by God. He can choose to deny us and not want to look at us and all this. So it's interesting that Chris talks about this, that there is a certain subset of rules that we must act in accordance to. Basically, God's will. What exactly is God's will? What exactly does he want us to do? And he said, oh yeah, it's mainly correlative to like some of the major religions in the world. For Michael Knowles' case, Christianity.
In a really basic question, I'm not going to ask you if I'm going to go to heaven or hell, but will I go to either heaven or hell?
You will persist after you die. Okay? Where you go depends on who Michael Knowles really is. And you would know that better than anyone.
Yeah, I hope I know that better than. But you're telling me I'm going somewhere.
Yes.
You're confident of that. I don't just evaporate. I don't just turn into oblivion.
Well, you can. If you displease God, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. God is going to cut you off, and he's going to say, I can't see him anymore. He's going to turn away from you, and then you won't be able to reunite. Salvation will be impossible for you, because salvation means that God has got to pull you back into himself.
Right.
Okay, but God doesn't want to see you anymore. He doesn't even know you exist. He knows your physical body is there, but he's not interested anymore because you hate him, you deny his existence, you offend him, so he's not going to look at you, right? So now what happens? Well, okay, you're dead. You still want to live. There's something in you that still desperately wants to live, so it's still going to be there. What happens now? Well, you try to create your own world for yourself, but if you're a bad person or you're an evil person, what kind of world is that going to be? It's going to be an evil world, and that's what we call hell.
This is what John Milton says in The Mouth of Satan. He says, the mind is its own place, and it can make a hell of heaven or heaven a hell.
Now you got it.
So it is through our actions of what affects the universe and our relationship towards it. We can make a heaven out of hell or a hell out of heaven. So Earth is a place where we all coexist and try to exist peacefully such that we all can live together. If we hate each other, we propagate hate, and hate is what grows. If we love each other, love is what propagates, and love is what grows. Hate propagates hate, love propagates love. And the propagation of such is that we have Earth. And Earth can be as much of heaven or hell depending on the decisions that we make. You can imagine if everybody hates each other, they'll tear each other apart. And that's an antithesis to what God is. That's why in the Bible, they say that God is love. Because if everything was propagating love all the time, heaven would be on earth, there'd be more peace, and there'd be less destruction. And since we are eternal beings that are made in the image of God, we cannot be destroyed. And we take this energy, this person who we really are, with us after we die. Which also means we take the heaven or hell with us. And if our existence is the antithesis of what God is seen as an all-perfect being. And that perfection is not something he's willing to compromise. Which is why if we displease God, he can choose to not be able to see us.
God is real, angels are real, demons are real. Is the devil real?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, it has to be. You know, we were talking about Michael Knowles being surrounded by the medium and, you know, you've got a boundary. Yeah. Well, God has a boundary too. He's got a very tight boundary. He is perfect. He can't take anything resembling imperfection, right? He can't take it into himself because that would be a contradiction.
Yep.
Okay, so God needs an antithesis in order to be properly defined. What is that antithesis? Anti-God or Satan. So it definitely exists. Now, Satan isn't coherent because, you know, he basically hates existence. Nevertheless, he gains coherence through human beings, through secondary tellers.
So you're not describing Manichaeism. You're not saying there's God and then the opposite of God and there's some maybe equivalence between the two. You're saying that God, obviously there is an antithesis. Christ has an antichrist, but that it's incoherent. And are you saying that he sort of that the devil sort of lacks substance, or that's why he needs the humans?
I'm saying the devil lacks coherence. Coherence is what brings everything into superposition, right, with itself. In other words, it allows something to, this is going to sound a little bit paradoxical, allows something to communicate non-locally with itself, right? All of its possible states are in superposition. They exist all at once, okay? And this is pretty much inescapable.
I'm reminded of a writer, Rene Girard, who had this idea that the devil, being who he is a kind of contradiction of being. And it seems to me what Girard says is something similar to what you're saying, which is that he requires us to kind of do his dirty work.
That is correct. Yeah. We give existence to the devil, to Satan. Now, you have to make a distinction, however, between Satan and Lucifer, for example. Now, Lucifer is an angel. Okay, that's what he's supposed to be. It's a fallen angel,
Right.
you know, but nevertheless, an angel, right? The angel of light, okay, the morning star, whatever you want to call him, okay? That is not Satan. Those are two different things.
What's the difference?
This would no doubt be classified as a heresy, for example, in the church.
I did not bring the Inquisition with me yet. They're not behind the curtains here. So what is your idea then? Because traditionally it's understood that Satan and Lucifer are the same person. You're saying they're different.
Yes.
How are they different?
Well, Lucifer walks the fence. Basically, he's the angel of light. What does light do? Basically, light is what brings reality to us. Okay, he's walking the fence between good and evil. We're all in the same boat. We all walk the fence between good and evil. Okay, how can we do that? Okay, well, through Lucifer.
Right.
Yeah.
And the grace of God.
Through Lucifer. Basically, Lucifer has been exiled here because God won't tolerate the imperfections of this place. Okay, he has Lucifer handle that for him, and that's why Lucifer is what he is. That's how he fell down here to earth. Okay, he's performing a function here. That function is light. I mean, I don't know. Do you follow what I'm?
I do. I'm still trying to parse the difference a little. If Christ says, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," is he describing Satan here, or he's describing Lucifer, or both?
If Christ were here and I could hear his exact words, I could perfectly interpret them.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But it's very hard to do that, 2,000 years after the fact, right? With all the different translations and interpretations that the Bible has undergone, okay?
And
so what I like to do is I like to approach it from first principles and look at it logically, right? Rationally. And what does logic tell us, if anything, okay? Well, logic tells us that basically God needs a negation, but that negation is too incoherent to function in this world except through human beings.
Right.
What's the rest of it? What's the rest of it all about?
Yeah.
And Lucifer is a concept that is better suited than Satan to that purpose.
I love this point that he's incoherent, that the old devil is incoherent. That I read some poem, I think it's a modern poem, that says, sin is a big problem because it's evil. But it's also a big problem because it's such a waste of time. It's so incoherent. When you think of when you take the suffering out of it, and you just think of people committing any particular sin, it just doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, the sense that it makes to them is they're enjoying it. They're hedonistically deriving pleasure from the sin. And of course, we all, have the same pleasure mechanisms.
Yep.
So we're all tempted to commit sin, but we've got to keep a lid on it. There have to be limits. Okay, and what I'm worried about is that now Satan controls the world, and there are certain people involved in running things who don't have those limits.
Well,
they're so rich, they're so powerful that they don't need those limits anymore. So they've more or less thrown them off.
Now, there's nothing new to the idea that Satan or Lucifer, or let's call him just the old devil himself, is the prince of this world, and that the rich and the powerful they do his bidding, and they're bad people, and they follow their lowest appetites and their pleasures, and they can be sadistic. And so that's been going on for a long time. Is there something particular about the moment we're living in that says it's actually gotten much worse?
Yes, that is, we've had so many technological advancements that now the technology of surveillance and coercion are such, and these people are so rich, they're like black holes gravitating all the money to themselves, that they're unstoppable, okay? And because they're unstoppable, because they actually run everything, okay, we are endangered by them now.
This goes back to the concept of hate propagates hate and love propagates love. When the people that rule the world are propagating a destruction, the antithesis of God, anti-life, more so death, as in the wages of sin are death, it becomes almost apocalyptic. Because if everybody is only working for their own self-good, out of self-righteousness, self-God, they almost kind of destroy the world for their own benefit. And if everybody is destroying their world for their own benefit, well, you have the apocalypse, which is why in the Bible there's needed for a Savior, which is also known as Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. A sort of savior to an apocalyptic world in the scenario that Satan somehow takes over the planet, aka the prince of the world, the ruler of the world. Problem being, Satan's incoherent, and when he is in charge, the world is hell on earth, and everyone's destroying each other. So God has to have this sort of paved salvation in a way. In that regard, the future is all determined based on us, our decisions, our free will. If we make decisions that are based within hate, self-righteousness, making ourself as God, then we create the destruction of the planet as we know it. But if we propagate love and act more so in, theosis of God, in accordance to God's will, then love propagates love and there's balance. There's less destruction and there's more equilibrium.
Before I let you go, as we sit here in the clouds, in some simulation of the clouds here, before I let you go, people are going to be asking, so what do I do? What should I do right now? Assuming we're not going to launch the Second American Revolution or anything like that. What should I do in my own life, even maybe beyond any political question?
Search for God. Ask God to establish a personal relationship with you. It's available. You're attached to God by your soul, okay? There's this soul that attaches you to God. You can receive the will of God into yourself, and to some extent the power of God into yourself, but you've got to be receptive. If you're not receptive, then you're cutting yourself off from God, okay? And once you do that, then you do not share the identity of reality itself, and you're done. Once your physical body expires, there is nothing that will carry you because you have denied it and rejected it. You follow me?
I do.
That's what people need to do.
I do. I think that's good advice.
I find it interesting that this man with one of the highest IQs in the entire world, the smartest man alive, says that God exists. And something I wanted to share with you guys. So we're going to be doing a couple more of these. We're going to be doing a lot more of these on this channel, and I'm just going to pump them out. As I find what is interesting, I'll share them with you guys. So hope this was fruitful for y'all, and yeah, hope to see you guys in the next one.